The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the windows of Seoul's bustling Hongdae District Cafe. Ji-yoon sat alone at a corner table, her trembling hands clutching her phone as she read the message that would shatter her world. The screen displayed her husband's words with cruel clarity. "I've canceled the adoption proceedings. This isn't the right time for us. We need to talk. And if you want a handsome CEO in your life and love videos like this, subscribe to our channel to have 10 years of luck in your life." Steam rose from her untouched Americano as tears threatened to spill onto her cheeks. Around her, the cafe buzzed with the ordinary sounds of life continuing as usual, the whir of coffee grinders, cheerful chatter, and clinking cups, while her carefully constructed future crumbled silently around her. 3 years of paperwork, interviews, and home studies dissolved in a single text message. Ji-yoon's mind wandered to the nursery she had secretly started preparing in their spare room. The soft yellow paint she'd chosen still sat unopened in the corner, waiting for the perfect moment to transform the space. She had hidden it behind storage boxes, wanting to surprise her husband with her preparations once they received final approval. The memories flooded back unbidden. She remembered the day they had first discussed adoption, sitting on their apartment balcony during a warm spring evening. Her husband had seemed so supportive then, holding her hand as they talked about giving a home to a child who needed one. They had spent countless nights researching agencies, discussing their options, and dreaming about their future family. Ji-yoon's phone buzzed again. Another message. "I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner, but I've been thinking about this for a while. People at work have been talking. It's different here than in other countries. I'm worried about how it will affect my career." Her hands clenched around the phone. The true meaning behind his words was clear. He cared more about others' opinions than their shared dreams. The society's judgmental eyes had won out over their plans for a family. She thought about all the times he had recently worked late, canceled their agency meetings, or changed the subject when she brought up adoption. The signs had been there, but she had refused to see them. Across the cafe, unknown to Ji-yoon, Suk-jin sat at his usual table, his laptop open to quarterly reports he was supposed to be reviewing. Instead, his attention kept drifting to the woman in the corner whose quiet distress seemed to fill the room. As a CEO, he was trained to read people, and everything about her body language spoke of a profound loss. He watched as she wiped her eyes with a napkin, trying to maintain composure in the public space. There was something dignified about her struggle to keep her emotions contained, something that resonated with his own carefully maintained facade of corporate success. The way she sat straight back despite her obvious distress, the careful dabbing at her eyes rather than obvious tears, it spoke of someone who understood the weight of society's expectations. Suk-jin found himself struggling to focus on his work. His sister's face kept superimposing itself over the stranger's features, reminding him of similar moments of private pain he had witnessed in his own family. The urge to approach her, to offer some word of comfort, warred with his usual professional distance and social propriety. He observed as she picked up her phone again, her fingers hovering over the screen before she set it down without responding. The action seemed to deflate her further, and she slumped slightly in her chair, a crack appearing in her composed exterior. The cafe's warm lighting highlighted the tension in her shoulders, the slight tremor in her hands as she reached for her cold coffee. Suk-jin watched as the woman pulled out a small notebook from her bag, her hands moving mechanically. As if on autopilot, the leather-bound journal fell open to reveal pages filled with notes and what appeared to be schedules, carefully planned timelines that now seemed to mock their creator. She stared at the pages, unseeing, before slowly closing the book. The scene triggered another memory for him. His sister had kept a similar notebook during her own adoption journey years ago, before everything had fallen apart. He remembered finding her one night, surrounded by torn pages from that very notebook, her dreams scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. The parallel made his chest tighten. Ji-yoon pulled out her phone once more, opening her photo gallery. Each swipe revealed another moment of hope now tainted by betrayal. There she was with her husband at the adoption agency orientation, both smiling widely at the camera. Another showed them attending parenting classes together, his arm around her shoulders as they held up their completion certificates. The most recent was from just 2 weeks ago, her husband pretending enthusiasm as they looked at children's furniture, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. The photos blurred as fresh tears threatened to fall. She had been so focused on preparing for their child that she had missed the signs of her husband's wavering commitment. The canceled dinner dates to discuss adoption paperwork, the growing silence when she talked about their future family, his sudden interest in late-night work meetings, all these pieces now formed a clear picture of his gradual withdrawal. A message notification popped up on her screen. "I've already spoken to the agency. They understand our situation." Many couples change their minds. The casual dismissal of their 3-year journey struck Jiyoon like a physical blow. She remembered the social worker's warm smile, the hopeful discussions about potential matches, the carefully assembled family profile they had created together. Had he already destroyed all of that while she remained oblivious? Across the cafe, Seokjin closed his laptop, no longer able to pretend focus on work. The woman's quiet dignity in the face of what was clearly devastating news stirred something in him. As a business leader, he had learned to trust his instincts about people, and everything about her spoke of someone whose strength was being tested but not broken. He stood up, intending to leave, but found himself hesitating. The cafe had grown quieter as the afternoon crowd thinned out, making the woman's isolation more pronounced. A barista approached her table, asking if she wanted a refill, and Seokjin noticed how she struggled to form a response, her voice barely audible as she declined. The moment crystallized his decision. He had spent years building his company on the principle of making a difference in people's lives, yet here he was, witnessing real pain and choosing to walk away. His sister's words from their last conversation echoed in his mind. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest acts of kindness. Moving toward her table felt both natural and terrifying. He had no plan, no prepared speech, nothing but an inexplicable certainty that this moment mattered. As he approached, he noticed more details, the elegant simplicity of her clothes, the wedding ring she unconsciously twisted on her finger, the way she carried herself even in distress. Just as he came within speaking distance, her phone buzzed one final time. The message preview was visible for a brief moment. "I've packed some things. I'll stay at my parents' house until we figure this out." The words seemed to hang in the air between them as Seokjin realized he was witnessing not just a setback, but the complete unraveling of someone's life plans. The cafe's overhead lights flickered on as dusk settled outside, marking the transition from afternoon to evening. Seokjin cleared his throat softly, causing Jiyoon to look up from her phone. Her eyes, though red-rimmed, held a wariness that came from years of navigating corporate social circles. "I apologize for intruding," Seokjin began, his voice carrying the measured tone of someone accustomed to careful negotiations. "I couldn't help but notice you seemed troubled. Sometimes talking to a stranger can be easier than bearing burdens alone." He kept a respectful distance from her table, conscious of not appearing threatening. Jiyoon's initial response was a polite but dismissive smile, the kind she had perfected during years of business dinners and social functions. "Thank you for your concern, but I'm fine." The tremor in her voice betrayed her composed exterior. Seokjin recognized the defensive posture, the same one he had seen countless times in board meetings when someone was trying to maintain dignity in a difficult situation. He made a deliberate choice to show vulnerability first. "I recognized something in your expression. It reminded me of my sister when she faced a similar disappointment. Sometimes the dreams we hold most dear are the ones that hurt most when they're taken away." His words struck a chord. Jiyoon's carefully maintained facade cracked slightly, and she found herself speaking before she could stop herself. "Have you ever had your entire future erased by a text message?" The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. 3 years of planning, hoping, preparing, all gone because someone else decided your dreams weren't convenient anymore. Seokjin pulled out the chair across from her, waiting for her slight nod before sitting down. "I'm Seokjin," he introduced himself simply, deliberately omitting his corporate title. "And no, not by text message. But I've watched someone I love have their dreams shattered by a single phone call." Jiyoon studied him, her professional experience helping her read people kicking and despite her emotional state. His suit was expertly tailored, but He wore it with the casual comfort of someone who saw it as a tool rather than a status symbol. "I'm Jiyoon," she offered, her voice steadier now. "And I apparently just lost both my husband and my chance at motherhood in the span of 5 messages." Sukjin absorbed this information without the usual awkward platitudes people offered in such situations. Instead, he shared something unexpected. "I run a social project that works with adoption agencies and corporate partners to support families in various stages of the adoption process." He paused, watching her reaction carefully. "We're actually looking for someone with personal experience to help shape our program direction." Jiyoon's laugh held a note of disbelief. "Are you offering me a job while I'm sitting here crying in a cafe?" The absurdity of the situation momentarily displaced her grief. "I'm offering you a purpose," Sukjin corrected gently. "And perhaps a way to turn your experience into something meaningful for others." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a business card, sliding it across the table. The embossed letters caught the light. SK Foundation, building families, building futures. Jiyoon picked up the card, her fingers tracing the raised text. The corporate world she knew was full of ulterior motives and hidden agendas. "Why would you offer this to a complete stranger?" Sukjin's response was measured but sincere. "Because sometimes the best qualified people are those who understand the pain of the process. Our current program works, but it lacks the perspective of someone who's been through it." He hesitated before adding, "And because I've learned that the best way to heal is often to help others avoid the same pain." The Foundation's meeting room buzzed with energy as Jiyoon stood at the front, presenting her proposal for restructuring their adoption support program. Her voice carried confidence she hadn't felt in months as she outlined the changes needed to better serve prospective parents. The room's modern design, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's skyline, contrasted sharply with the deeply personal nature of her presentation. The current system focuses too heavily on financial support while overlooking emotional preparation, Jiyoon explained, gesturing to her carefully prepared slides. "From personal experience, I can tell you that the psychological barriers often outweigh the financial ones. We need to implement a comprehensive mentorship program that pairs prospective parents with those who have successfully completed the adoption process." Sukjin observed from his position at the head of the table, noting how naturally Jiyoon commanded the room's attention. In the 3 weeks since their chance meeting at the cafe, she had thrown herself into understanding every aspect of the Foundation's work. Her presence had already begun to shift the organization's dynamic, bringing a level of authenticity that no amount of corporate planning could achieve. Furthermore, Jiyoon continued, her voice growing stronger, "We need to address the cultural stigma head-on. I propose launching a media campaign featuring successful adoptive families from various backgrounds. Not just celebrities or wealthy families, but ordinary people who have created extraordinary families through adoption." The board members exchanged impressed glances. One of them, an elderly executive who had initially been skeptical of bringing in an outsider, nodded approvingly. Sukjin felt a surge of pride watching Jiyoon transform her personal pain into purposeful action. After the presentation, as other board members filed out, Sukjin approached Jiyoon. "Your ideas about the mentorship program are exactly what we've been missing," he said, maintaining a professional tone despite his growing admiration. "You've brought a perspective that none of us could have provided." Jiyoon gathered her materials, her hands steady now where they had once trembled with uncertainty. "It feels different, being on this side of the process," she admitted. "When I was trying to adopt, I felt so alone. If we can prevent even one person from experiencing that isolation, it will be worth it." Their eyes met briefly, and Sukjin found himself noticing details he tried to ignore. The way her professional demeanor softened when she spoke about helping others, the quiet strength that had replaced her initial vulnerability. He quickly redirected his thoughts to safer territory. "The board wants to fast-track your proposals. We'll need to schedule additional meetings to work out the implementation details." Jiyoon nodded, but her attention was caught by a photo on Sukjin's desk, a younger version of him with a woman who shared his features. "Is that your sister?" she asked, remembering his mention of her during their first meeting. Sukjin's expression flickered with an emotion Jiyoon couldn't quite read. "Yes," He answered simply, but his tone suggested a deeper story. She was actually my inspiration for starting this foundation. He paused, seeming to debate whether to continue. Perhaps we could discuss it over dinner? Strictly professional, of course, to talk about the mentorship program details. The invitation hung in the air between them, laden with unspoken possibilities. Ji-yoon felt the familiar flutter of anxiety, but it was different now. Not the paralyzing fear of loss she'd experienced in the cafe, but something more akin to anticipation. That would be helpful, she replied carefully, maintaining the professional pretense they both knew was becoming increasingly difficult to uphold. The autumn breeze carried a chill as Ji-yoon stepped out of the foundation's building, only to find herself face-to-face with her ex-husband, Min-ho. He stood waiting by the entrance, his corporate attire as impeccable as ever, but his presence felt like an intrusion into the new life she'd begun building. "So this is where you've been hiding," Min-ho said, his tone carrying that familiar mix of condescension and concern that she now recognized as manipulation. "Working for a charity. This isn't like you, Ji-yoon. You had a promising career in marketing before all this adoption obsession." Ji-yoon straightened her spine, drawing strength from the confidence she'd gained over the past weeks. "I'm not hiding, Min-ho. I'm doing meaningful work. Something you wouldn't understand since it doesn't directly benefit your corporate image." Her voice remained steady, though her hands instinctively gripped her briefcase tighter. Min-ho stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Your parents are worried. They think you're having some sort of breakdown. First the adoption fixation, and now this complete career change." He glanced at the building sign. "The business community talks, Ji-yoon. How do you think it looks when my wife suddenly starts working for a charity after our separation?" "Ex-wife," Ji-yoon corrected firmly. "And I don't care how it looks. For the first time, I'm doing something that matters." She tried to step around him, but he moved to block her path. "You're being naive," Min-ho pressed. "Do you really think this foundation hired you for your expertise? They're probably just using you for publicity, the abandoned wife finding purpose in charity work. It's a perfect PR story." Before Ji-yoon could respond, a deep voice cut through the tension. "Actually, we hired Ji-yoon because she's revolutionizing our entire approach to adoption support." Suk-jin stood in the building's doorway, his presence commanding enough to make Min-ho take a step back. Her marketing experience is certainly valuable, but it's her insight and dedication that make her irreplaceable to our organization. Ji-yoon felt a rush of warmth at Suk-jin's words, followed immediately by guilt for that reaction. Min-ho's eyes narrowed as he assessed Suk-jin, clearly recognizing the authority he carried. "And you are?" "Park Suk-jin, CEO of the SK Foundation," he replied, moving to stand beside Ji-yoon. "Your ex-wife's proposals have already secured us additional funding and corporate partnerships. We're fortunate to have her." Min-ho's expression shifted, the businessman in him recognizing the name. Park Suk-jin? Of the Park Group? The realization that Ji-yoon now worked directly with one of Seoul's prominent business families seemed to unsettle him. Ji-yoon watched the interaction, seeing Min-ho through new eyes. Where she had once seen strength, she now saw only insecurity masked by arrogance. The contrast between him and Suk-jin was striking, one man wielding power to intimidate, the other using it to protect and support. "Ji-yoon, we have that meeting with potential donors," Suk-jin said smoothly. "Shall we?" He gestured toward his car, parked nearby, offering her an escape while maintaining her dignity. As they walked away, Ji-yoon felt Min-ho's eyes on them. Her heart raced, but not from fear. The proximity to Suk-jin, his subtle protection without undermining her own strength, stirred emotions she wasn't ready to acknowledge. In the car, she finally let out a shaky breath. "Thank you," she said softly, "but you didn't have to intervene. I could have handled him." Suk-jin started the car, his expression thoughtful. "I know you could have, but you shouldn't have to handle him alone. That's what the foundation is about, making sure no one has to face these challenges in isolation." The late evening light filtered through the foundation's conference room windows as Ji-yoon and Suk-jin sat reviewing project documents. Their proximity had become comfortable over the weeks, though an undercurrent of tension remained unacknowledged. The encounter with Minho had shifted something between them, creating a deeper level of trust and understanding. "I never told you why I started the foundation," Sukjin said suddenly, setting aside a folder. His voice carried the weight of a story long held private. "My sister, Sumin, tried to adopt 5 years ago. She was single, successful, and had everything planned perfectly. Typical of our family." He smiled slightly at the memory. But the system wasn't kind to single women seeking to adopt. The constant rejection, the judgment, the whispers about her choices. It broke something in her. Ji-yoon set down her pen, recognizing the significance of this sharing. "The photo on your desk, it was taken before all this?" she asked gently. Sukjin nodded, his usual composed demeanor softening. She was different then. Bright, ambitious, full of plans. After the final rejection, she withdrew from everything, moved to America, cut off most contact. That's when I realized the system needed to change, not just for her, but for everyone facing similar battles. "Is that why you approached me that day in the cafe?" Ji-yoon asked, the question that had lingered in her mind finally finding voice. "Partly," he admitted. "You reminded me of her, but you were different too. Where she crumbled, you showed a resilience that impressed me. Even in your darkest moment, there was a strength that made me think you could help create the change we needed." Ji-yoon felt tears threatening at his words. "I don't feel strong," she confessed. "Some days, I still wake up and can't believe how everything fell apart. Minho and I had everything planned, the perfect corporate couple adopting a child, setting an example. I never imagined he'd choose image over love." Sukjin finished softly. Their eyes met in shared understanding. "My parents still think I'm going through a phase," Ji-yoon continued, the words flowing easier now. "They keep saying I should reconcile with Minho, that adoption was too ambitious anyway. They don't understand that it wasn't just about having a child. It was about creating a family that defied society's narrow definitions." Sukjin moved closer, his presence offering comfort without intrusion. "That's exactly why your work here matters so much. You're helping change those definitions, showing people that family can take many forms." The proximity between them suddenly felt charged with unspoken possibilities. Ji-yoon found herself studying his face, the kindness in his eyes, the slight worry line between his brows that appeared when he was concerned about others. Before she could stop herself, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss lasted only seconds before reality crashed back. Ji-yoon pulled away abruptly, horror at her actions flooding her face. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, gathering her things hastily. "I shouldn't have. This was completely inappropriate. I should go." Sukjin remained frozen, his expression unreadable. "Wait," he started, but she was already hurrying toward the door. The following weeks at the foundation took on a strained quality as Ji-yoon threw herself into work with renewed intensity, carefully maintaining physical and emotional distance from Sukjin. She scheduled meetings through his assistant, submitted reports via email, and spoke only when necessary during group discussions. The kiss hung between them like an invisible wall, unacknowledged but ever-present. From his office window, Sukjin watched Ji-yoon leading a workshop with potential adoptive parents. Even at a distance, he could see how she commanded the room, her genuine empathy connecting with participants in a way his corporate approach never could. Her dedication to maintaining professionalism only heightened his awareness of her absence in the moments they once shared. The foundation's work continued to expand under their joint leadership. Ji-yoon's mentorship program had already matched 15 couples with experienced adoptive families, and the success stories were beginning to attract media attention. But the personal warmth that had characterized their early collaboration had been replaced by careful formality. One evening, as Ji-yoon worked late in the common area, a new face appeared at the foundation, Lee Min-young, a woman whose quiet determination reminded Ji-yoon of herself months ago. Min-young shared her story of failed adoptions and social pressure, and Ji-yoon found herself opening up about her own experiences. For the first time since the kiss, she felt the knot in her chest loosen slightly. "It's strange," Min-young said, after listening to Ji-yoon's story. You've created this amazing support system for others, but who supports you? The question struck uncomfortably close to home. Their conversations became regular, with Min Young visiting the foundation several times a week. Ji-yoon found comfort in sharing her experiences with someone who understood the unique pain of having adoption dreams shattered. They often worked together late into the evening, developing new support group protocols and sharing stories of their journeys. Suk-jin observed these interactions from afar, a complex mix of emotions churning beneath his composed exterior. He saw how Ji-yoon smiled more easily with Min Young, how her shoulders relaxed in a way they hadn't since the kiss. The sight brought both relief and an unexpected pang of loss. During one board meeting, Ji-yoon presented their latest initiative, a comprehensive guidebook for single parents seeking adoption, inspired by conversations with Min Young. As she spoke passionately about breaking down barriers, Suk-jin caught himself remembering the moment in the cafe when he'd first recognized her potential to transform the foundation. The distance Ji-yoon maintained began to affect their work in subtle ways. Projects that once flowed smoothly now required multiple revisions as they struggled to communicate without their usual synchronicity. The board noticed the change, though none dared comment on the obvious tension between their CEO and their rising star. One night, as Suk-jin prepared to leave the office, he noticed Ji-yoon and Min Young sharing tea in the break room, their quiet laughter carrying through the empty building. The scene reminded him painfully of the easy rapport he and Ji-yoon once shared. He turned away, his steps echoing in the empty hallway, wondering if his sister's experience had made him too cautious, too afraid to acknowledge what was growing between them before Ji-yoon took the step he couldn't. The tensions at the foundation reached a breaking point when Min-ho escalated his interference. He began showing up at donor events, using his corporate connections to spread subtle doubts about the foundation's leadership. During one particularly tense fundraising dinner, he cornered Ji-yoon near the restrooms, his voice low but threatening. "You're making a fool of yourself," Min-ho hissed, blocking her path. "Playing house with these charity cases while throwing away your real potential. Do you think I haven't noticed how you've aligned yourself with Park Suk-jin? Is that your strategy now?" Ji-yoon felt her hard-won confidence wavering under his assault. The elegant ballroom suddenly felt suffocating, the crystal chandeliers casting shadows that reminded her of darker days. "My work here is legitimate, Min-ho. The foundation is helping real families, changing lives. Why can't you just leave me alone?" "Because you're dragging my name through the mud," he countered, stepping closer. "Every time you parade around with your adoption crusade, people whisper about how I abandoned you, how I destroyed your dreams. Do you know what that's doing to my position at the company?" Suk-jin, who had been searching for Ji-yoon after noticing her prolonged absence, rounded the corner just as Min-ho grabbed her arm. The sight triggered something primal in him, memories of his sister's breakdown mixing with his protective instincts toward Ji-yoon. "Remove your hand," Suk-jin's voice cut through the tension, carrying the weight of generations of corporate power. "Now." The command in his tone made Min-ho step back reflexively. What followed was a carefully controlled confrontation. Suk-jin led Min-ho to his private office, away from prying eyes and potential scandal. The conversation that ensued was a masterclass in corporate warfare, with Suk-jin systematically dismantling Min-ho's attempts at intimidation. "Your concerns about reputation are understandable," Suk-jin began, his tone deceptively calm. "So, let me be clear about how this situation can unfold. The Park Group has significant influence with your company's board. One word about your harassment of our foundation's key director, and your career trajectory might face some unfortunate obstacles." Min-ho's face paled slightly as the implications sank in. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm offering perspective," Suk-jin corrected smoothly. "Ji-yoon's work here is protected not just by my personal interest, but by the full weight of the Park family's corporate and social connections. Consider carefully whether your vendetta is worth the potential consequences." Later that evening, when Ji-yoon learned of the confrontation, her reaction surprised both of them. Instead of gratitude, she felt a complicated mix of emotions, appreciation tangled with frustration at having another man fight her battles, even if that man was Suk-jin. "I needed to handle him myself," she said, pacing Suk-jin's office. "You can't always be my shield. I didn't do it just for you," Suk-jin admitted quietly. "Watching him try to destroy your confidence, it reminded me too much of what happened to Sumin. I couldn't stand by and watch history repeat itself." The annual charity gala hosted by the Park Group transformed the Grand Hyatt's ballroom into a glittering showcase of Seoul's elite. Ji-yoon found herself navigating the complex social waters she once traversed as Minho's wife, but now with a different purpose. Her black evening gown, elegant yet understated, reflected her new role, no longer an ornamental corporate wife, but a woman with her own mission. Corporate leaders and their spouses clustered around Suk-jin, their conversation a careful dance of business and philanthropy. Among them stood Mrs. Kong, the matriarch of one of Seoul's oldest business families, who watched Suk-jin with the calculating eye of someone seeking a suitable match for her daughter. "The foundation's work is admirable," Mrs. Kong said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, "but surely it's time for you to focus on your own family, Suk-jin. My Haewon has just returned from her studies abroad. Perhaps you remember her?" Suk-jin maintained his diplomatic smile, though Ji-yoon noticed the slight tension in his shoulders. From her position across the room, she could see the careful way he handled these expectations, just as she once had. The pressure to conform to traditional family structures seemed ironic given their foundation's mission to expand the definition of family. As the orchestra began a waltz, Suk-jin excused himself from the group and made his way to Ji-yoon. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and for a moment, the weeks of careful distance evaporated. He extended his hand in invitation, and she accepted, their professional facade cracking under the weight of unspoken emotions. "They're all watching us," Ji-yoon murmured as they moved across the dance floor, her hand fitting perfectly in his. The warmth of his touch sent familiar sparks through her body, ones she'd been trying to ignore. "Let them watch," Suk-jin replied softly, guiding her through the steps with practiced ease. "They've been watching me for years, waiting for me to fulfill their expectations of what a park heir should be." The intimacy of their dance drew subtle attention. Ji-yoon could feel Mrs. Kang's disapproving gaze, could hear the whispers about the divorced woman who seemed too close to the eligible CEO. The familiar weight of societal judgment pressed in, but something had changed. In Suk-jin's arms, the pressure felt less suffocating. "Your sister," Ji-yoon ventured carefully. "Did she face this kind of scrutiny too?" The question made us. Yeok-jin's steps faltered slightly. "Worse," he admitted. As a single woman seeking to adopt, she challenged everything our social circle believed about family. I defended her publicly, but sometimes I wonder if I could have done more." Their bodies moved closer, the dance becoming more intimate than strictly appropriate for business associates. Ji-yoon could feel his heartbeat through their joined hands, steady and strong like his presence in her life had become. "This feels dangerous," she whispered, even as she leaned imperceptibly closer. "Everything worthwhile usually does," he responded, his voice carrying a depth of meaning that made her breath catch. As the music reached its crescendo, Ji-yoon pulled away abruptly, the reality of their situation crashing back. She saw Mrs. Kong approaching with determination, a young woman in tow who could only be Haewon. The weight of expectations, judgment, and potential scandals suddenly felt overwhelming. The foundation's main conference room felt unusually tense as Ji-yoon reviewed the unexpected investment proposal that had arrived that morning. The documents bore the letterhead of one of Seoul's most prestigious investment firms, offering substantial funding that could expand their adoption support programs nationwide. However, the familiar signature at the bottom made her blood run cold. It was from Minho's new firm. Suk-jin entered the room just as Ji-yoon was tracing the company connections outlined in the proposal. Their eyes met briefly before she looked away, the intimacy of their dance at the gala still fresh in her mind. "You've seen it?" she asked, gesturing to the papers. "Yes," he replied, taking a seat across from her. "The offer is legitimate from a business standpoint. The funding would allow us to open branches in Busan and Incheon." His voice remained neutral, but she could sense his concern beneath the professional facade. A message from Minho arrived on her phone. "Consider it a peace offering. We could work together again, like before." The foundation needs corporate backing to survive, and I need to repair my image. It's a win-win situation. Ji-yoon felt compelled to confront Min-ho directly. She found him waiting in the lobby of his office building, wearing the same self-satisfied smile she'd once mistaken for confidence. The glass and steel structure towered above them, a monument to corporate power that had once intimidated her. "What's your real agenda?" she demanded, holding up the proposal. "You've never supported adoption work before. Why now?" Min-ho's smile didn't waver as he stepped closer. "Think practically, Ji-yoon. Your little project with Park Suk-jin has gained more attention than I anticipated. Instead of fighting it, I'm offering to be part of it. Under my firm's guidance, we could make the foundation more commercially viable." "You mean more conventional," Ji-yoon corrected, finally seeing his true intentions. "You want to water down our mission, turn it into another corporate social responsibility project that looks good in annual reports but doesn't challenge the system." "The system exists for a reason," Min-ho countered. "Your radical ideas about family structures, about challenging traditional adoption practices, they make people uncomfortable. With our involvement, we could reshape the foundation into something more palatable to corporate donors." The conversation left Ji-yoon shaken, not by Min-ho's presence this time, but by the realization of how much she'd changed. She found herself in the foundation's garden, a small space they'd created for families to meet and bond. That's where Suk-jin found her, sitting on a bench among the early evening shadows. "You look like you need to talk," he said softly, maintaining a careful distance that both acknowledged and respected their growing connection. Ji-yoon looked up at him, vulnerability clear in her expression. "He wants to change everything we've built, make it commercially viable," she quoted bitterly. "I spent years trying to fit into his world of corporate appearances and social acceptance. I can't go back to that. I won't." Suk-jin moved closer, his presence offering strength without demanding anything in return. "Then don't," he said simply. "We'll find another way. I'm not letting anyone compromise what we've built here, what you've built." The intensity in his voice made Ji-yoon look up, meeting his gaze directly for the first time since the gala. The connection between them crackled with unspoken possibilities and dangers, professional boundaries blurring with personal desires. During a late evening at the foundation, Ji-yoon found herself organizing files in the archive room when Min-young entered, her presence somehow different than usual. The familiar warmth in her eyes had been replaced by something more complex, a mixture of guilt and resolution that made Ji-yoon pause. "I need to tell you something," Min-young began, her voice carrying the weight of confession. "I'm not just another woman seeking adoption support. I'm Suk-jin's sister, Soo-min. I came back from America to understand what my brother had built in my absence, to see if the system had really changed." The revelation struck Ji-yoon like a physical blow. Memories cascaded through her mind. Every conversation, every shared moment of understanding, now cast in a new light. "All this time," she managed, "you've been watching me, evaluating me?" "At first, yes," Soo-min admitted. "When Suk-jin told me about the woman he'd met in a cafe, about how she was transforming our foundation, I had to see for myself. But Ji-yoon, what I found wasn't just a capable director. I found the friend I needed 5 years ago, when everything fell apart." Their conversation was interrupted by raised voices from the main office. They emerged to find Suk-jin engaged in a heated discussion with Min-ho, who had arrived unannounced. The tension in the room was palpable, years of unspoken conflicts finally surfacing. "Your sister's return changes nothing," Min-ho was saying, his corporate mask slipping to reveal genuine anger. "The foundation still needs our investment to survive. You can't protect Ji-yoon forever from the realities of our world." Suk-jin's response carried the quiet authority that had first drawn Ji-yoon to him. "You're wrong. Ji-yoon doesn't need protection. She never did. What she needed was space to become who she truly is, someone strong enough to challenge the very systems you hide behind." Ji-yoon stepped forward, Soo-min's presence behind her giving her additional strength. "Min-ho, I finally understand why our marriage failed. You wanted a wife who would adapt to your world. Instead, you got someone who dared to imagine a different one. The confrontation reached its climax as Sukjin moved to stand beside Jiun, their shoulders touching slightly. "I've watched you rebuild yourself," he said softly, though everyone could hear. "And in doing so, you've helped rebuild others, including my sister. You once asked me why I approached you that day in the cafe. The truth is, I recognized in you the same spark I once saw in Sumin, the courage to dream of a different kind of family." Sumin stepped forward, revealing herself to Minho. "The foundation isn't just about adoption anymore. It's about redefining what family means, about creating spaces where people can be their authentic selves." Jiun understood that instinctively, in a way that took me years to grasp. Minho looked between them, finally seeing the futility of his position. The power dynamics had shifted irreversibly. Without another word, he turned and left, taking his corporate threats with him. In the quiet that followed, Sukjin turned to Jiun. "I've spent years building walls to protect myself and others," he confessed. "But you've shown me that real strength comes from tearing them down. I want to build something new with you, not just the foundation, but a family of our own choosing." The moment stretched between them, filled with possibility. Jiun looked at Sumin, who nodded encouragingly, then back to Sukjin. "A family of our own choosing," she repeated softly, understanding the full meaning of his words. "Yes, that's exactly what we've been building all along, isn't it?" Their story had come full circle, from a chance meeting in a cafe to the creation of something larger than themselves. The foundation would continue its work, stronger now with Sumin's return and the unity of its leaders. But more importantly, they had proved that family could be found in unexpected places, built through choice rather than convention, and strengthened by the very challenges meant to break it.